Hey there, viewer. If you want to know more about Catherine, the love-obsessed queen, then stick with us till the end. But as always, before we start, don't forget to like, subscribe and hit that bell icon so you never miss a new video. All right, let's get into it. Catherine, the Great Myths and Truths. Catherine's story is wrapped in tons of tales and legends, some sweet, like how she was one of Russia's greatest rulers, turning it into one of Europe's strongest empires. Under her, the empire expanded by over 200,000 miles. She built more than 100 new cities and championed art and science. Her era was called the Golden Age. She was also crazy smart, smarter than most men around her, loved reading, writing, and even exchanged letters with big thinkers. She wrote her own memoirs and was the first to write children's literature in Russia. But then there were the other stories, especially about her love life. Catherine was famous for her appetite for men. Many were way younger, and some even gained power and wealth through their affairs with her. Of course, the royal court, filled with jealousy and spite, spread vicious rumors about her. They accused her of unthinkable things, like bestiality and being a sex addict, even claiming she spied on others from behind curtains. A lot of this was just society hating powerful women. They couldn't accept that a woman in charge was anything but unnatural. From German princess to Russian empress. Catherine was born a German princess in Prussia, but fate threw her onto Russia's throne, even though she had no real claim to it. Yet she knew how to play the game and ruled for 30 whole years. The story began when Empress Elizabeth of Russia was ruling but had no legitimate heir, so she picked her nephew, Prince Peter of Holstein-Gottorp, even though he was a reckless teenager, just 17, obsessed with drinking, dogs and rats. No joke. He'd train rats and dogs like armies, holding military trials for them and executing any that disobeyed. Elizabeth thought marriage might straighten him out. Big mistake. At first, she tried to arrange a marriage with the sister of Frederick the Great of Prussia, but he refused, seeing Russia as a backward, uncivilized place. So she settled on a poor, simple, 16-year-old German princess, Sophia, who later became Catherine the Great. Problem, she was Protestant, so she had to convert to Russian Orthodoxy. After that, in 1745, she married Peter, and her nightmare began. A marriage from hell. Peter treated her horribly. He preferred his dogs over her, was always drunk, and ran with a corrupt crew who encouraged his worst habits. Catherine, being educated and sensible, refused his twisted demands, so much so that she'd run away crying, begging for help. She tried over and over to fix him, but nothing worked. Meanwhile, Catherine noticed that the men at court were smarter, more stable than her husband. That's when she decided, I deserve better. She learned Russian, dressed like royalty, and charmed the court, until she met Gregory Orloff, one of her most famous lovers. He was all-man, charismatic, commanding, and Catherine was instantly hooked. Their passionate affair began, and soon after she gave birth to a child. But people whispered because Peter was likely impotent or sterile. Everyone suspected Orloff was the real father. Then everything changed. Empress Elizabeth died, and Peter took the throne. Peter tried to rule seriously, but he failed miserably. He was still irresponsible and drunk, just like before. One day, a nationalist officer barged into a tavern where Peter was drinking, scolded him, and reminded him of his ancestors' legacy. Maybe it was the alcohol talking, but Peter actually listened for once. He signed 2 major decrees abolishing the hated courier system, which had oppressed the people for years, and restoring some nobles' rights that had been taken from them a while back. Now, these could have been great reforms, but Peter just went right back to his old ways. And when he found out about Catherine's affairs, he decided to expose her, declaring that her child wasn't his. At this point, Catherine just couldn't stay quiet anymore. She could handle Peter's insults and neglect, sure, but him exposing her affair, that was pretty much a death sentence, because back then, treason in Russia was no joke. There was no mercy, no forgiveness. So She sent for her lover Orloff, and together they plotted to overthrow Peter. Officially, it was because he was reckless and would ruin the country, but the real reason? She was terrified he'd expose her adultery and get her executed. Peter caught wind of the plan and arrested one of her co-conspirators, which forced Catherine to act fast. Now, Catherine might have seemed kind and romantic, but honestly, her mind was snake-level cunning, my friend. The second she realized Peter knew, she turned the tables before he could strike back. Catherine hopped on her horse and rode straight to the Russian military barracks in St. Petersburg, asking the soldiers for help to overthrow her husband. She knew they hated Peter. He always favored his German guards over them. So the soldiers switched sides, pledged loyalty to Catherine, and arrested Peter in the fortress. They forced him to sign his abdication. But Catherine wasn't done yet. Alexei Orloff, her lover Gregory's brother, tried to poison Peter in prison. When Peter fought back, Alexei strangled him to death. And just to cover all her bases, Catherine also had Ivan VI killed, eliminating any rival claimants to the throne. People accused her of ordering the hit, but she denied it. Nobody believed her, though. She was already seen as a traitor, especially since Peter had actually planned reforms to help the peasants at the nobles' expense. Now they didn't trust her at all. Like any cheating wife, Catherine justified her betrayal by claiming Peter neglected and mistreated her. She'd say, "If fate had given me a husband I could love, I might have stayed faithful." But he never changed. Truth, she could have divorced him, but she didn't want to lose palace life, or her string of lovers. So she convinced herself, and honestly history too, that Peter was not stupid but utterly lacking common sense, making her coup necessary for Russia. All just excuses to cover up her scandals. Catherine had around 12 documented lovers, some before she even took the throne, others during her reign. One of the earliest was Sergei Saltykov, a handsome nobleman she was with while still married to Peter. Some historians think he's the real father of her son, Paul, born 1754. Empress Elizabeth suspected Peter was sterile, so she didn't care as long as there was an heir. Some even say Elizabeth introduced Catherine and Saltykov, encouraging the affair to secure the throne. But Saltykov betrayed Catherine too, leaving her heartbroken. Her longest early relationship was with Gregory Orloff, the man who helped her overthrow Peter. It lasted 12 years, until he cheated on her too. Gregory Potemkin, the love of her life. Then came Potemkin, the most famous of her lovers. She first met him during the coup when she begged the guards for help. He charmed her instantly, plucking a feather from his hat and placing it on hers, saying, "Your hat needs a feather, Your Majesty." That small gesture stuck with her forever. Unlike Orloff, who was rough and wild, Potemkin was romantic, educated, and loved books just like her. Their love? Next level. She spoiled him rotten, making him a general, gifting him millions of rubles. His wealth hit 9 million in just 2 years. He got a huge palace in St. Petersburg through lavish parties and even built fake villages by the Dnieper River to romance her like a movie. She wrote him love letters, including one where she said, "My dear friend, I love you deeply. You're handsome, witty, joyful. When I'm with you, nothing else matters. I've never been this happy." When he was away at war, she'd sleep next to his portraits, buying expensive art just to imagine him beside her. Final thoughts. Catherine used love as power, but also got played by it. She claimed Peter drove her to betrayal, but in truth she wanted control over Russia, her heart and her legacy. And hey, if history's going to call her a man-eater, she made sure they also called her great. Catherine the Great love, power and hypocrisy. Some historians believe Catherine and Potemkin's relationship wasn't just love. They might have even secretly married in a small religious ceremony. But sadly, all that love vanished when Potemkin suddenly died. The news hit Catherine like a lightning bolt, and she lived the rest of her life heartbroken. Killing Peter made people see Catherine as a tyrant, but, philosophers and elites actually loved her ideas, especially because she had these progressive visions for Russia. In 1767, she even drafted a legal reform project called the Nakaz, which was packed with Enlightenment ideas from top European thinkers. She dreamed of abolishing serfdom and bringing justice and tolerance to Russia. The Nakaz was never officially adopted, but interestingly, articles praising it later called Catherine an enlightened European ruler. But when it came to war and conquest, Catherine was just like any other warmonger. She had this obsession with expanding the empire, sending her armies into brutal wars against the Ottomans, Sweden, Poland, Lithuania, and Crimea. Historian Leslie Pole Hartley wrote that Russia under Catherine was an aggressive state. Its power came at a huge cost to the people. Artists painted flattering portraits of Catherine, spinning her as a queen of progress, but honestly, history never really saw her that way. She was a hypocrite, talking big about justice and reform, but doing nothing to actually help the poor. For example, she set up a legislative commission with 600 members from all social classes, except serfs, who were basically slaves, and peasants. They were supposed to apply Montesquieu's ideas like separation of powers, but well, nothing changed. Catherine stole bits of Montesquieu's philosophy, tweaked it to call Russia an absolute monarchy, not a tyranny, and called it a day. Why she couldn't reform Russia? Catherine wasn't stupid. She knew if she angered the nobles who helped her overthrow Peter, she'd lose the throne. So she protected their interests, even if it meant keeping serfdom alive. When a rebellion led by Yemelyan Pugachev broke out in 1774, sparked by the war with Turkey, peasants and serfs rose up violently. The royal army crushed it, but thousands died. After that, Catherine dropped all pretense of reform. She was just too scared of losing power. Hartley wrote that serfdom remained Russia's shame under Catherine, all because she feared ending up like Peter. Cultural wins, while ignoring the poor. Where Catherine did succeed was in westernizing Russian culture. She turned Russia into a hub for European art, theatre and literature, built museums like the Hermitage and collected masterpieces, even copies of Raphael's Vatican paintings. She commissioned monuments, like the Bronze Horseman of Peter the Great, opened Russia's first public library and state-funded girls' school, made St. Petersburg a city of neoclassical architecture. But all this glamour hid the truth. She cared more about looking great than actually being good. The Crimean Spectacle, 1787. Catherine loved showing off. In 1787, Potemkin, her then lover, arranged a lavish royal tour of Crimea, a real propaganda masterpiece. She travelled in a golden procession, nicknamed Cleopatra's Fleet, with yachts, live orchestras, a massive entourage. Even Emperor Joseph II of Austria and the King of Poland showed up to applaud Russia's new power after its conquests from the Ottomans. Catherine dreamed of taking Constantinople, modern Istanbul, and making it the new capital of Orthodox Christianity. The big question: was Catherine really a sex deviant? Now the million-dollar question: was Catherine actually a sex addict like the rumours said? Peter tried to pressure her into his kinky fetishes, but she always refused. No solid historical proof confirms the wildest claims about her. Yes, she had many lovers and enjoyed their company, but most of the perverted stories were exaggerated by her enemies. At the end of the day, Catherine was a woman who loved power, art and romance, but also a ruler who chose empire over justice. Catherine the Great, the scandalous final years. Okay, let's get one thing straight. Nobody actually proved Catherine was a sex deviant, but her reputation took a hit when she got older and refused to slow down. After Potemkin died, she kept taking young lovers, way younger than her, spoiling them with money, letting them live in her palace. Even though she usually preferred intellectual men, in her final years she hooked up with shallow, pretty boys who had zero influence. She just wanted them to make her feel young, even if they were lying to her. This is why history wasn't kind to her. Even her own son Paul and grandson Alexander I hated her reckless behaviour. The British mocked her in a famous cartoon. There's a notorious British cartoon from 1791 called An Imperial Stride, where Catherine is paraded across Europe, while other rulers like George III, Louis XVI and the Ottoman Sultan look at her with disgust and mockery. Why? Because by then everyone was laughing at her sex obsession, especially since Russia was expanding aggressively under her rule. The wildest and fakest rumours. Oh, there were plenty about Catherine, some of the craziest stories. Well, folks said she slept next to expensive furniture, pretending it was Potemkin. Others claimed she had a close countess test her lover's stamina before she took them herself. But the most disgusting rumour, that she died at 67 years old while having sex with her horse. Yeah, believe it or not, someone actually said that. But historians, they say these are just myths, the same kind of nasty rumours thrown at Cleopatra, Marie Antoinette and Elizabeth I. The truth? She died from a stroke on November 17, 1796 in her Winter Palace bed, not in some scandalous way. Catherine's legacy in movies and TV is honestly something else. A controversial figure like her inspired tons of shows and films. The Great, that's on Hulu, ran from 2020 to 2023, is a wildly inaccurate but hilarious comedy about her rise to power. 3 seasons, great ratings. Then there's Catherine the Great, the 2019 miniseries, which is more serious, focusing on her political struggles and wars. And don't forget Catherine the Great, the 1995 film, the most classic take diving into her personal and political battles. Final question. Was she really great? Catherine wasn't just an empress. She was a political and cultural hurricane that reshaped Russia forever. She ruled, wrote, loved and conquered, living a life too big for just one story. But was she truly an enlightened ruler? Or just a brilliant actress pretending to be one while tightening her iron grip on power? Did history treat her unfairly? Or was she really the power-hungry, love-obsessed hypocrite people say? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss the next episode. What other topics do you want us to cover?